What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. Today's guest is an accidental hospitality leader. She manages the ongoing renovation work across the growing portfolio for the 8th largest hotel company in the U.S., Sonesta Hotels International. She oversees the building and design standards by brand for conversion and new build hotels within the managed and franchise portfolio for Sonesta. She's been working in the hospitality industry for over a decade and a half. She's the Senior Director of Renovation and Capital Projects at Sonesta Hotels. Ladies and gentlemen, Bridget Rooks. Welcome, Bridget.
Thanks, Dan.
Awesome. Well, it's so good to see you here, and thank you for your time. I know you're a mom with a new-ish one who's 17 months old.
Yeah,
and
18, 19.
Yeah, 18 or 19 months old. And in the midst of that, you had her in the midst of the pandemic, correct?
Yes.
Which is insane because, as I said in a recent conversation with Brian Quinn, you guys went from 50 hotels before the pandemic to over 1,200 now.
Yeah.
And now you are responsible for allocating all of the capital and projects to convert brands, create brands, and get it going.
Yeah, I'm part of the process. Yeah, part of the committee on
Part of
that.
the committee for
that.
And I think what's really interesting about your story and journey is that I said at the beginning, you're an accidental hospitality leader, right? So when you think about your journey into hospitality and where you came from, I don't think many people know you were a playwright.
I was.
And it's interesting in our conversations before how in many ways, creating a play and putting it out on stage and producing it and writing it and being involved in that whole process is very similar to what you're doing now.
I think so. Yeah, I don't think that that's a stretch.
Yeah. So if you think about, and I want to pull on that thread a little bit in a second, but if you think about that as kind of a baseline or a framework, a frame to work within.
Right.
On your journey, how do you define hospitality as an accidental hospitality leader?
Yeah, I would define hospitality as a warm welcome, right? And being ready to greet guests, to meet the needs of their occasion and of that location, of where they're going, and just being prepared to exceed those expectations and provide that warm welcome.
And if you think about that warm welcome, because in so many of these conversations, that warmth or hearth is really, it's a feeling. And if you think about, I don't know what your writing process was, but if you think about the stacks of paper, I assume you would write or type. How would you do it?
I would write, then type.
Okay, good. So you get that, you're working on all these different ideas, and then you're iterating them and revising, and then you know it's just right.
Right.
When you know it's right, it's not a formula, it's a feeling, right?
Yeah. And it's specific to each project, right? Yeah.
So as you think about, this growth story of 50 to 1,200, and you're writing standards, and you're getting design on board, you're coordinating with construction, you're coordinating with your capital partners. How is that your play now? How do you look at it as a play?
I look at it very similar to a play, right? So a play would always start for me with an outline and kind of with a through message, almost a thesis statement. And so for custom renovations, that thesis statement is it's your design narrative, and that's ultimately it's the elevator pitch for how the renovation capital that's going to be spent is going to improve the performance of the hotel, and how is that going to deliver on that guest experience. And then from a writing perspective, just always having in mind the different stakeholders that need to be part of the process and getting them engaged and understanding their perspective. So you're writing a play, you're always looking at perspectives of all these individual characters. And so the same it sounds like a stretch, but I think the same applies to our industry, right? So in developing standards, they need to work for delivering the brand standards, the defining brand standards, right? But they also need to work for owners and asset managers, right, that are evaluating the performance of the hotels. They have to work for developers that are looking to partner with Sonesta. So it's keeping all of those perspectives in mind to evaluate the criteria of any number of initiatives that we're rolling out right now.
Yeah, and I feel like, as a, I write, but I wouldn't consider myself a writer. But in those times when you just know it's right. It's like there's that thread or narrative that kind of spins through everything.
Yeah.
And, iteration, and then you have that feeling, it's there. I want to also go back into the accidental part. So being a playwright, how did you find your way into this crazy industry? Because so many of these conversations that we've been having here on Defining Hospitality is how many people have no hospitality experience that come into it, and then their eyes and hearts are lit up by the people, the community of, designing, building, owning, operating hotels, and then they never want to leave.
Right.
So, like, how did you find your way from playwright to here?
Yeah, I mean, it was random, and it's a great industry, right? And I think that for the right personalities, like once you get a taste of it, there's no going back almost. But I was, writing plays. It might not surprise you that doesn't necessarily pay a lot of money. And I had student loans, right? So I was also managing a Trader Joe's at the time, which is a great company. But, the hours weren't very stable, and I was looking for something that was more 9 to 5 to balance out, to pay the bills while I was also pursuing my little $3,000 plays or whatever. So I had a friend in Colorado from high school that was an English major, and she worked for Benjamin West, which is a purchasing company in the industry, which I'm sure I don't need to say. And she worked for them in Colorado, and I just thought, okay, well, if she can do that with an English background, maybe I could do that with an English background, right? So they had a Chicago office that had just opened at the time, and they had a London office, which was very enticing to me. And so I applied, I got the job, and I just started as a project coordinator at Benjamin West when I got into the industry. And I had an amazing mentor, this woman, Toby Nudelman, that just, would just give me every opportunity to do more, right? So, and learn more and take on more responsibilities and, kind of guide the effort and let me sort of soar out on my own with that as well. And so that's kind of how I got into purchasing. And then, as I was in purchasing, I was taking on more and more projects. I was, leading a team. And then, eventually I became a project director, and I had, I think, 25, 28 projects at a time. And so then you're getting all that exposure. You're on all these conference calls. You're going to all these sites. You're part of the process. And I was always fascinated by the entire effort that it took to make these renovations happen. And so I wasn't just paying attention to the part that was related to me. Is this coming in within budget? Is this product arriving on time? I was listening to everything that was going on. And I learned a lot through that process. And then I had an opportunity to transition into project management with another amazing mentor, this woman, Vicky Smith, who had done it for a long time. And, she kind of showed me the ropes, and I got involved on the project management side, and I was a little bit intimidated because I didn't have a lot of construction background, but I was very diligent, I was very organized, and, I wasn't afraid when I didn't know something to call people that I had met. I had met a lot of contractors through my time as a purchasing agent, so I would call them and just, sort of suss out, is this the right effort on this project? And, again, kind of took on a lot of projects in that role, and so then that just gets you more learning opportunities. And I did a lot of work with Sonesta kind of throughout that through line. So that's how I wound up really getting to know a lot of the people at Sonesta, and then joining in 2020.
So I heard you say through that, and also in just a lot of other conversations, and just from my own experience, listening, mentors, asking. And I think one of the things that has struck me throughout us knowing each other is you've never been afraid to say that you don't know something.
Right.
And I find that so many people are scared to be vulnerable in that way. But you're also you ask so many questions so that you can always find it. And you're so good at finding the people that know the answers, right?
Yeah.
So have you always been that way? And like, where do you think that being okay with that vulnerability so that you can better your understanding of how everything works, where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I don't think I was always that way. I think that when I was younger, it was, important to me to seem like I knew what I was doing. I have 3 older siblings, and, when I was growing up, I have a younger brother too, but when I was growing up, all I wanted to do was be like my older siblings and be on the same wavelength as them, right? So I think when I was younger, I was definitely more looking to portray that I was at that level already. And I think that, just from, I don't know when it turned, but you're not effective pretending to know something that you don't know. And so once you realize that, and again, I don't know exactly that turning point, it becomes, how do you do the best job that you can, right? I remember the first union project I was working on when I was a project manager. I was trying to put the budget together, and I just really wanted to make sure that I understood the labor increase correctly, right? So I was just calling everybody that I knew that would have an understanding of that, and just, okay, I know how to do a budget, I know how to put these line item estimates together based on past data, but what's the union premium that I should be carrying for this? And really, I don't know, it's important for me to be correct in my work. And so I think that might be where it comes from, that is how I jump that hurdle, is that I'd rather be correct at the end of the day than appearing and knowledgeable.
Yeah, and then so if the driver is to be correct and have the best portrait or work done, it's like, okay, well, I'm okay. If that's number one driver, then I'm okay asking all these questions to get to that point.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so to use it, as you were talking, it made me think of something that I once heard, where when you were trying to get that for the union example, like, how many people do you think you spoke to before you got to there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably spoke to 3 or 4 people just to kind of make sure that, the assumptions were, worth presenting to people, that I could stand behind them, because I would have to stand behind them, as the project advanced. It's
interesting, because I once read this a story of, I don't remember if it was, they were looking for a sunken battleship or submarine or something in the middle of the Atlantic, right?
Yeah.
And there was an American crew looking for it, a German crew, a English crew, a French crew. There were 3 or 4 groups, and they all had, based on last location, radio, this. They spoke, they all had different coordinates for where they were thought in this general area. Yeah. And when they put all the coordinates together into an average and found that one spot,
right,
it was there.
Yeah.
They found it.
Right.
And I don't know, I just think that this idea of being, I guess that's what it is, it's curiosity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think it's curiosity and, some humility as well, to just be willing to have that vulnerability, right? So.
Yeah. And then when you think about hospitality as well, for hotels and travel, I know that you've always loved it, and you shared with me like a really cool thing about how your parents brought you up.
Yeah.
And does that, how they brought you up with respect to travel and vacation, does that fuel your idea of curiosity as well?
I think definitely. I mean, travel remains a huge priority for me and for my husband and our family. We both of our daughters have been to like 15 states at this time. We try to leverage, travel along with mom on trips, and we take advantage of, being able to use miles to go to places. So both of my kids have been to Scotland. The older one's been to France and to Germany and everything. Wow. And you meet friends, and you just build these relationships, and with other like-minded, curious people, right? That I think is really exciting. And for me, but
there's also that element of surprise too. Yeah. And when the way that your parents would surprise you was, I'm just really envious that, like, why didn't I think of that? Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So why don't you share that?
So my my dad passed away when I was young. He passed away when I was 10. And so I have this sort of time capsule in my head of very vivid memories from when he was around. And my parents would not tell my younger brother and I when we were going on vacation. So they would pack all of our bags and just wake us up morning of, and then you'd be on your way to the airport. And it was, incredibly exciting. I have at O'Hare, between the B and C gates, there's that, light display in that terminal. And I have such vivid...
those neon rainbow tubes under there with the mirrored ceiling.
And those have been there since at least the 80s, right? So I just have, I have such vivid memories of being down that hallway looking up and just like, where are we going? We're going to Florida. It's just, it's wonderful. And it's wonderful to kind of instill that excitement with travel and just that sense of adventure and the sense that, things will happen along the way and you just adapt to them. You keep going. And I think that definitely was part of what made me catch the bug for the industry once getting into it, because you get all these opportunities to see new places. And, one of my favorite parts of my job is that you go to locations you wouldn't necessarily vacation to, but they have their own merit. And so you get all this exposure to all these great locations, and you get to know people that have great perspective on those locations. And it's the best.
I also think when you're going to those locations that you normally wouldn't go to and you have a project there and then you're working with the designer who more often than not they do because they want to get the narrative for that location, right? You have your brand, but then they need to get the brand and the flavor of the location. And I love like walking into a design firm's office when they're in that research phase,
the ideation phase,
so deep, and they find these really cool and curious stories that then it's like, okay, how do we make this into a real thing? So if you look at like the projects that you're working on now as far as a surprise on that narrative side of like the location, what's been like a really cool one that you've seen recently?
We're kind of just with the custom projects that we're doing, we're in that process right now. So we're developing those narratives right now. We just kind of launched them this year. So I don't think I can speak to that specifically right now with the process that it's in, but the research that's been done, seeing what buildings that, were built as, apartment buildings, and then they used to have these great terraces with bars and everything, and how can we tie that into the design? I love that part of the journey. I love that, using that to define the narrative. And it's great. I love observing that creativity and leaning into that creativity, touching base with design firms throughout the conceptual design phase to kind of collaborate on that. It's great.
And then I know being new on the journey, new-ish on this like post-pandemic journey, in speaking to Brian, he mentioned that you guys were spending an insane amount of capital. Right.
Our capital partner.
Or your capital partner, right? And but you're responsible for allocating that responsibly.
Well, so it's a team effort, right? So it's the asset managers, it's operations leaders.
Well, and I say myself. You, I mean you and the team that you're on.
Right.
All the stakeholders in each of the projects.
Right.
So, and that number is like $500 million plus or minus, right? That is a tremendous responsibility. Right?
It is.
And then how do you guys manage that as far as making sure that, okay, you've captured that narrative for each of the projects, like you're in that good feeling thing.
Right.
But then there's like a fiduciary responsibility that all of you have to your capital partners to make sure that you're getting an ROI on that. And sometimes in what we do, it's really hard to measure that.
Right.
But how do you guys as a team make all that happen? Because to go from 50 to 1,200 of anything, it's in any world, that's a lot. That's like ultimate scale.
Right.
And I'm just really curious by like the dynamism that you guys must have and your communication. Like, how do you get it done? Yeah,
I think we spent a lot of time, my team, my department, but also the brand team, and defining what the brand standards are for each of our brands over the last, 2 years. Joining Sonesta at the end of 2020, it had been much smaller, so we didn't have those standards well defined, right? So we've spent a lot of time developing those, but I think in tandem with that effort of defining what the standards are and how those relate to design standards specifically, is what are our areas of flexibility? Because in defining the areas of flexibility, it gives you the lens to look at each individual project from an owner's perspective of, for instance, if there's a shower surround, right, and it's not to our brand specification, we're not going to take the assumption to replace that just because it's not to our brand specification if it's bright and modern and isn't a detractor from the room. So what are the opportunities to improve the performance of that hotel? Are those opportunities coming from, replacing all those surrounds, or are they coming from, pursuing room type conversions and looking at the public area and how do we integrate our objectives within the public spaces? So one of the cool things about Sonesta being as lean as we are right now and as small still as we are is that we look at things on that individual basis. We don't look at things at that one size fits all, you must do this. What is the ROI in that market for putting in this brand standard? And if it doesn't make sense, to pivot from that and really focus on the elements of scope that are going to improve the performance at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so that we look at every project kind of exhaustively, individualistically. But I think that it's ultimately to our betterment, to our primary capital partners' betterment, that, that's the rigor that we're making those decisions with. And
I love the fact that, okay, you have these goals, you have the thesis, as you said earlier.
Right.
But I like the idea of areas of flexibility. It's like really picking your battles.
Right, exactly.
What's best? Okay, there's a tailor-made standard for everything, but really, it doesn't necessarily work over everything. So it's like, how do you, and I find a lot of projects that I work on, I find sometimes the thesis is so inflexible that they're missing, sometimes people are missing or they don't ask the question, what's most important here?
Right.
Like what helps us get here? And I find that those are really important conversations to have.
Yes.
And to also be vulnerable and flex on, because it's like, hey guys, like this really isn't working. Like, let's see how we can pick our battles and figure this out. Earlier you said on that curiosity or vulnerability side, you weren't always that way. It was just a process over time of wanting to be right and put the best product forward. If you think about the team that you're on now, or previous mentors, or even influences, where do you think you learned that from the most, as far as being able to pick those battles and get to the point of what's most important as like a check on your process?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just learning from past experiences. I've been involved in a lot of projects at this point, right? And then, I work so closely with our primary capital partners. My department is under our overall strategy team within Sonesta, and so always trying to work together across our departments to find those areas of impact. What is the real opportunity here? From a mentorship perspective, it's countless in a way, because there's kind of the intentional mentors, the people that have taken me under their wing. But then there's also, getting so much exposure through so many projects to so many different people. In the vendor community, I've learned so much from many different manufacturers about going on factory tours and finding out about the efficiencies that can be achieved with certain things that would still deliver the design intent, right? So if you make a headboard 2 inches thinner, is that really going to detract from the design intent, or is that going to be, providing some efficiency on the buying side of those materials? And then, just being open-minded to some of those learnings and insights from others within the industry. On the designer side, I think there's a lot of designers that do a great job of working around, using the restrictions of a budget, for instance, as a challenge, and really coming up with creative ways to still make transformations. Miriam Torres is amazing at that. I can name many others, right, that deliver on that. And then, leadership within our organization. We've got a really, amazing, strong senior leadership at our within our organization that have a lot of experience and really a strong vision of, wanting to have consistent brand identities, but also just what are the important elements of those consistent brand identities. And so, the influences contributing to that are kind of countless, right? And it's a process.
And I guess it's probably that innate curiosity that you have, where you're always open to that and always open to the learning. As you look at your life experience from being the little girl with the big siblings, to the surprise travel, to writing plays, to entering the hospitality industry accidentally. That's a great foundation. Also the mentors, right? We all stand on the shoulders of those before us. But as you take your life experience and kind of look at where you are now, the person I'm speaking to, and you kind of look forward as far as the team and the leaders that you're all around and that have assembled at Sonesta, what's exciting you most about the future right now?
We've done so much foundational work over the last 2 years, but to execute it, we need that capital investment, right? So the partnership with our primary capital partner, willing to take that bet on us and roll this out over the next few years. Staying at a Sonesta in 3 years will mean something completely different than it means today, right? Because today all of our hotels, or most of our hotels, are conversions that are still bearing the hallmarks of other brands, right? So that's incredibly exciting for me. We did Sonesta Select prototype, Sonesta ES Suites prototype, Sonesta Simply Suites prototypes over the last year. And we executed all of those. Basically, we got the brand work done from the brand team, went straight into design, and had all of those prototype reviews this summer with converted assets. And, we worked with DLR Group on Select. We worked with Baskerville on ES and Simply. They all did amazing jobs meeting the objectives of each of those brands, but also making the design something distinct and exciting and flexible. So on Sonesta Select, it doesn't look anything like any other, upscale focus service brand. It's a completely unique product that has clear advantages within the marketplace, and I just can't wait for us to roll that out. And then on the ES and the Simply side, you have all these different base building types within our portfolio. You have Residence Inns and Summerfields and Staybridge Suites and everything
existing.
that have been converted to Sonesta ESs. So how do you make a design work for all those different building types? How do you make it scalable? How do you make it approachable for the development community that are bringing hotels into our brands? And just all the teams did a tremendous effort with building kind of kit-apart selections that really carry the theme of the design intent and expression, but leaves that flexibility for, the opportunities within that specific hotel, that specific market.
I just heard you say kit apart.
Yeah, kit of parts.
Oh, kit of parts.
Yeah.
Okay. So, walk us through a good, that kit of parts.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So that's used to kind of, in a way, bridge the gap between the recently converted properties, which is probably signage and some other things, and maybe marketing experience, but the rooms are still the rooms, the lobbies are still the lobbies, because you just haven't gotten to them yet.
Right.
Okay, so if you look at this massive conversion and also rollout of new brands, how do you, and if you say the most important thing is execution, how do you guys measure how you're executing, or if you're executing well? Is it a property by property thing? Does everything roll up into a dashboard? How do you measure your execution? Yeah,
so we at this point we don't have any completed renovations that are portraying what has been established so far, but we have data metrics. We have a lot of research and analyst groups, we're looking for more and more ways to collect that guest feedback on the experience. We have a customer advisory council that our sales and commercial team meet with on a regular basis to solicit feedback for guest priorities, and they give us a lot of insight and learning of what opportunities exist that we wouldn't have thought of on our own. And then through the scope process, we're developing the scopes, we're developing the budgets, we're working really closely with asset management to try to project what the ROI lift is going to be for individual scope components. And then if it's not aligning at the end of the day with the overall cost of the renovation, like what areas are the priority, what areas should we be doubling down on, and what areas should we be scaling back from? And it's it's going to be different per property and per location, but it's a team effort. There's a lot of people within the strategy department at Sonesta, but also a lot of people from the primary ownership group with the asset management that have a lot of really concrete knowledge of those markets that they're overseeing and of those hotels that they're overseeing, and just being receptive and having that dialogue on an ongoing basis is really important. And also, getting the feedback from the development team too. In developing these focus service standards, we talked to everybody. We were socializing the designs with everybody as they were being developed and making sure that we were getting that feedback. We have Sonesta Simply Suites is a great brand, and it has a very lean operating model that we don't want to break, right? And so getting kind of a panel of experts of the operators themselves to weigh in on, this sort of program-wide rollout. What is a priority? What works? What doesn't work? What are the things that we need to make sure we include with this? And that's kind of that socialization, that looking at the perspective of those characters, right? That is I think really important to us to try to achieve that long-term result.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then again, going from like the select service to luxury, right? Because
we have upper upscale.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So select service to upper upscale. Are there any, looking at the guest comments or feedback that's coming back, are there any threads, or are any comments heavily weighted across all of it, or are they kind of individualized by bucket, so to speak?
Yeah, I would say it's by buckets, it's by location too, right? So an upscale or an upper upscale hotel the needs will vary depending on, the market and the comp set of that market and what are the opportunities. And I think that, in approaching a project, my team, but also the designers that we partner with, we like to ask those leading questions of the operators, because they know their market, they know their comp set, they know what their competitive disadvantages are. And so really taking the opportunity of a renovation to address those competitive disadvantages is something that we really strive to achieve.
Yeah, and I don't know, I just find that you look at the experiences out there, and I know as much as everyone says that they want to hear from the guests, I often get the feeling that when guests give feedback, oftentimes it's not listened to, right? And again, the feedback is to address some of those concerns. It requires a lot of investment too,
right? And you're not going to hit every one of them, right? Because you're not necessarily going to have that investment.
Yeah, so you kind of have to balance them all.
But it's not just the guests, it's, it's the sales teams of those hotels. And it's, what would make a difference in your ability to sell this hotel? Or, what would keep guests here longer? What would build your base business? Is that what you need to achieve? Do you need to be focusing on the ADR? That's where I think our approach at really trying to look at each property individually is important. An airport hotel is going to have different needs than a downtown location or a resort location. And, that all kind of goes into informing our approach to individual renovations.
I want to go back to the playwright side of things again, because it's just so, I don't know if I really know any playwrights, so I'm considering you a playwright.
Okay.
You are one.
A former playwright.
Are you still writing?
No, it's a little busy with my day job and my kids, but I'd be open to it in the future. I loved doing it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then if you think about that first okay, so you write this play, and let's overlay it with the work you're doing now, right?
Sure.
You write the play, you're working with the production team,
Yep.
the director, the actors. It's up there on stage.
Yeah.
The lights go down, the lights come up,
Yeah.
and that exciting feeling. What's the, looking forward with your Sonesta hat on?
Yeah.
What's the next opening night, so to speak?
The next opening night for Sonesta. We have early adopters. I think we have 12 hotels that are the first to adopt our prototype design, that are in construction or will be in construction at the beginning of the year. And so that's exciting. It's the first opportunity that we have to really roll out these designs. And it took a lot to get them to a point where basically as soon as the prototypes and model room reviews were complete, we were, off to the races trying to get those executed. And we had done a lot of pre-work on those properties leading up to it. So that's going to offer us a lot of opportunities in different locations to sort of test out, the success of those designs in further detail and refine from there. And, on the full service side, those are much longer processes, right? But end of next year, beginning of 2024, we're going to have, the first half dozen full service hotels transformed, right, within our brand standards. And so I'm really excited about next year. I'm excited about 2024 because I think that that's where you're going to start seeing some of those transformations with that thesis statement, with that unified brand standard approach and understanding our target guests, understanding the key defining brand standards, understanding all the wonderful brand work that our brand and marketing team did, rolling those out into executed projects I can't wait. So I would say, mid 2024, hopefully we have a whole lot to see in that.
Cool. And then if you think about the projects that have converted to this new, bigger Sonesta, or in the middle of it, and as your maybe guests are staying at Sonestas for the first time more and more, what are some of the best examples of guest feedback that you're getting?
Well, so the hotels haven't fully converted yet, but of the public spaces that we executed in... even being in midstream, so to speak. Like, people have stayed at this hotel. They're coming back before. There could be a new team. Yeah. There's a new lobby. There's there is a new experience. Absolutely. Despite the rooms being the same. Like, what are some great examples of guest feedback? Yeah. So our Sonesta Select prototype hotel, which is in Foxboro. We were looking at the reception area and trying to look at it from a long view, right? So right now, people are still needing the 2 check-in stations for a hotel of that size. But as time goes on and you get more self-check-in, you get more mobile check-ins, right? How do you make that area adaptable in the future so that way you're not having to completely redo it down the road? And so DLR Group and our innovations team work together to kind of define this immersive market experience around the reception area, and then the reception pods themselves in the future are convertible to sort of merchandise display case. So if you wind up needing fewer pods in the future, then you have that ability to change the use of that space. And then we implemented self-pay at the market and sort of strategic merchandising at the market, so that way it's not just this afterthought. It's, we're offering products intentionally. We were working with Impulsify about some of those selections, and they provided a lot of great insight. And the feedback that we are getting, I went back to that hotel just a couple months ago, and the guests are loving it. They're loving being able to just come in and find something that's really appealing to them, pay for it on the spot, and I think it's great, and I can't wait to roll out that type of thing at more hotels.
I love the idea of that you said offering products intentionally, right? Because being a road warrior, you go there, and it always seems like, oh, I forgot to pack something, and then it's kind of where I need to buy that, whatever it was, or if I'm hungry or needed water, it's kind of always like crammed behind the desk, and it's always like an afterthought. I love that idea of intentionality. Yeah. And then, our innovations team, I'm working really closely with them as well to roll out Sonesta Work Suite. And so that's, kind of a multifunctional meeting space facility. So that way it's not just, your
your tables and classroom setting, it's flexible and it has different zones to really help facilitate collaboration and, breaking away from the main, presentation activity to brainstorm and everything that they're bringing to the table, the innovations team with the designers that, we get their sort of custom specification and design intent to those spaces is so exciting, and it goes down to even details that I'm not directly involved with, like OS&E touch points, right? So having, sort of mind break games to really sort of jumpstart that creativity, and having casting solutions for the TV so that you're not trying to plug in a HDMI cable to facilitate your meeting. And that's another thing that we're really looking forward to rolling out at more locations.
So that's really cool. So Work Suite, is that for people staying in the hotel, or it could be businesses or groups coming in to utilize this collaboration and co-working? But it's co-working and collaboration?
Right. I mean, it could be used for either. So it could be used for sort of team meetings, for presentations, for co-working. It's versatile by nature in the objectives for it. And really, we have a lot of people at Sonesta that have spent time at Convene and other sort of meeting-centric places. And so we're bringing all of those learnings into, how do we make sure that this is executed correctly? And
it's much better than a Zoom breakout room.
100%, right? Yeah.
People coming back together to meet.
Yeah. And so, that's for the guests of the hotels. It's to drive people to stay at the hotels, but it's also if there's an office park nearby, bring them into the hotels too. So it's really exciting, and we're doing it really well and really thoughtfully. And so I can't wait to.
So engaging other local businesses to come and use it. It's better than the old conference room with just like an easel in the corner. Right.
I mean, and it's meeting the guests where they're at now.
Convene has done an amazing job of like repurposing office floors for that kind of collaboration as well. They're really cool. All right. Well, I'm excited for it, and I'm excited for 2023 and 24 and beyond. But I want one kind of last question. If, again, this kind of touches back on the kind of that idea of mentoring and learning and curiosity, but for yourself.
Yeah.
So if you, the Bridget I'm talking to now, go back to playwright Bridget, right?
Yeah.
Managing a Trader Joe's store, getting your first production up on stage.
Yeah.
But you now, the Bridget a decade and a half or more later, appear in front of your younger self.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for yourself?
If I look back to my younger self, I would say be patient and be open and take on as many new challenges as you can. I remember the first couple years that I was in the industry, I just wanted to I wanted to kind of immediately be further along, and it takes time. You need a lot of exposure to sort of learn the ropes, and it's a continuous process of learning, right? And so if I'm really speaking to my younger self and trying to alleviate some of the frustrations of my first couple of years, it would be to have patience and just expose yourself to as many different aspects of the industry as possible. And it's incredibly exciting, and you learn from everyone, right? It's inevitable that you're learning from everybody if you're listening. So
if you're listening and if you're open.
Right.
And that breeds into curiosity.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Your younger self appreciates it.
I'm sure.
Yeah. And I appreciate it too. Bridget, if people want to learn more about Sonesta or you, like, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I try to check it fairly regularly, so that's a good one.
Great.
Yeah.
And then is the story of Sonesta published anywhere that people could read about?
You know what? There's a great book.
Sonny and Esther?
Yeah, Sonny and Esther, that touches on that stuff. The title is escaping me right now.
That's quite.
I'll follow up with you for the show notes.
Yeah, great. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm genuinely grateful for your time and to be here in this beautiful suite at the Royal Sonesta in Chicago.
Yeah.
And we have the Corn Cob building down there.
Yeah.
The river. Kind of makes me wish I was back here on St. Patrick's Day when the river is green.
I don't think these rooms are to be missed on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, turn up the rate on those.
Absolutely.
But with all sincerity, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
I appreciate it. I know how busy you are, and it's hard to carve out the time to do it. So
well, it was great talking to you.
Yeah.
Always is.
Thank you. And then you guys out there, the listeners, thank you so much. I mean, again, I got to come up with a new way to say this, but it's truly humbling that we keep growing every single week, and people are listening and people are engaged, and I don't know, hospitality is pretty awesome. So if it's changed your view or thinking on hospitality, how to deliver it, how to roll it out, how to create that feeling, how to gain new experience or be more curious, please pass it along to a friend. It's all been word of mouth.